Hello, I'm Paul Beckwith. I think an awful lot about risk because humans are very bad at assessing risk, especially when the probability of an occurrence is very, very low, but the impacts to society, the consequences, if a certain event happens, is very high, and the risk is actually obtained by multiplying those two factors, very small number, probability by a very large number, and it gives you a sort of number, could be in between, of course, but it's hard to get a handle. The uncertainty is very, very high, but with so climate change up to now has been, abrupt climate change or catastrophic climate change up to now has been thought of as being a very, very low probability. But as temperatures continue to accelerate at record rates, as greenhouse gases continue to rise at record rates, as the fossil fuel industry continues to expand pipelines and extraction, the probabilities are no longer small. They're getting much, much higher for catastrophic consequences. In fact, we're seeing many already. So I came across this peer-reviewed paper in phys.org called A New Method for Determining How Society Thinks About Risk. And this is an interesting study. Just to get a handle, I'm looking at it in detail, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit to you, show you some of the paper and some of the results, so that we can get a better understanding of risk, and then we can use that understanding to apply it to the climate problem. So there's different ways you can look at risk. You can do text mining if you like you can look at studies and look for sort of keywords and see the frequencies of occurrence of keywords. Or what this study does is it uses a novel technique. What they did is they asked people what came to mind when they said risk, and they took five the top five things. Like if I asked you about risk, what would the five top things you say about it, or five words you say that what risk means to you? And then so they start with the one word risk, and then they branch out to five others. Now, for each of those five others, they then ask you to go the next level down. So if you say danger is one of them, for example, they say, one of your top five is danger. Then they say, okay, what five things do you think about when you think about danger? And you say five different words. So you end up with another 5 times 5 is 25 on the second level down, 25 words. Plus the 5 original words is 30 words. So from that, then they do this with 1,000 odd people more, many people, and in different languages, and Dutch, German, and English. And they looked then for patterns, and they did it across a cross section of male, female, and against a cross section of ages. So I mean, we all know that young teenage males, for example, they evaluate risk differently than the rest of us do. And as they age, to young men and then to older men, then their risk tolerance, the risk changes. So risk isn't a constant throughout one's life. Risk is sort of context dependent, depends on your background, it depends on, and it's very, very different for different people. So, I think of some of the things that I did as a young kid, as a teenage male, and the risk is, you take more risks, right? And I think of one of my sons who, for jollies, he climbed up I got a call one morning, and they said, do you know Edward Beckwith? And yeah, okay. So went out. It turns out that he climbed a crane on a construction site, and he posted a video online while he was doing it. And for some reason, somehow the construction crew got a hold of that video, saw the video, and basically, I think it was that channel, the channel was being monitored or something by the police, and they saw this happen, provided the info to the construction crew, and they, you know, so I went and visited them in the van, and they were all watching this video of my kid climbing up this tower, filming it with his buddy. So that's one example. You know, I drove my son to Nova Scotia. He started at Dalhousie, and of course Hurricane Fiona was hitting, and he was supposed to go surfing on the Sunday night. Hurricane hit on the Saturday. I said, well, surely they've canceled it. And he said, no. He said, they just say prepare for hurricane type waves. So, you know, they all went surfing. And then I found out later that he and a bunch of boys from Dalhousie went swimming on the Friday night before the storm hit, just to check out the waves and stuff. You know, that's the story I got. Who knows, maybe they went on the Saturday during the intense parts, but this is how risk is. And this is, you know, of course we all know about you know, the number of accidents that teenage drivers get into, specifically males. So, you know, all I'm saying is that our views on risk are continuously changing, and understanding a bit more about these views is very important when we think about the risks to society from climate change. So let me come over here to the to show you the paper. Okay. So this is the article in phys.org, a new method for determining how society thinks about risk. So based on all of the results from people, they created, the 5 key words were fit mostly into these 5 categories. So one category is the threat, for example. So unpredictable operation, uncertainty, disease, stress, readiness, death, courage, avoid fear, injury, danger, etc. Okay. There were also risks associated with investment. So these were, you know, risks of car racing, roulette, casino, bank, stake, win, lottery, gambling, investment, shares, stock exchange, those sort of things. So money-oriented risks, and these, you know, risk versus reward. Then there was the activity, like, you know, speeding, road traffic, adrenaline, spontaneous, airplane, no risk, no fun, recklessness, smoking, extreme sports, bungee jumping, skydiving, all those sort of things. You know, my risk-taking son has also done the bungee jumping on the Great Canadian Bungee Jump, which Trudeau hit the news recently, Canada's Prime Minister, for doing it on the weekend with his kids in Quebec. And my son's also done the skydiving thing. I mean, I do things like scuba diving and that, and he's really not into that. But anyway, so these sort of activity things. And then there's the fortune things, like, you know, adventure, luck, life, chance, games, money, profit, health, sports, board games, you know, so the fortune sort of activities. And then there's an analysis category, you know, opportunity analysis. So it's basically an analysis of words and trends over male versus female and over age. So it's considered the semantic components of risk, so the words of risk, and so you create these word clouds of all the words contained in the respective components, you know, of what people said in the study. And then it looked at trying to analyze these things, you know, the risk similarity. So it did a lot of statistics on it, but let's talk about risk a bit more general first. So from pandemics to nuclear energy, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic has gotten a lot of people thinking a lot more about deeper questions about, you know, risks in life. So that's one of the reasons why this study is done. I mean, that pandemic's got people really thinking about a lot of different things. So for pandemics to nuclear energy, of course, we should say, climate disruption is key, but they don't say it here. The world is full of risks. Psychologists at the University of Basel have developed a new method of determining how risk is perceived within a society. So, of course, many of our activities involve a certain degree of risk, whether to our work, finances, or health. But how is risk perceived within a society, and how do individuals think about risk? Okay, so this is what they tried to discover. There's a lot of academic interest in the phenomena of risk. It's in all different disciplines. But these disciplines like psychology, sociology, and economics, even science, they define it in different ways. Little attention has been paid until now to the fact that the meaning of risk can differ from individual to individual depending on your goals and life experience. Okay, so if things are happening that are affecting negatively your goals, you perceive them as, negative risks. If things are happening that, like luck, that helps you go further towards your goals, then those are considered, positive risks. So risk isn't all negative. Also life experience. Very young people without much life experience, risk takers, their level of risk tolerance is much higher, especially young males. They think that they're invincible, if you like. They're going to live forever. It's important to understand how different people think about risk in order, for example, to gauge attitudes to new technologies or societal changes. So how do we gauge the risks of, say, artificial intelligence? How do we gauge the risk of something like solar radiation management or carbon dioxide removal technologies, to use technology on large scales to try to, say, remove carbon from the atmosphere, to cool the planet in different locations, etc. So risk links the polar ends of the sentiment spectrum. So basically they used word associations and an algorithmic process that maps the representation of risk for different groups and individuals. So they used a new approach. They used what's called a snowball word association method. So participants were asked to name 5 things they associate with the term risk. Okay, so you can do this exercise yourself. If you hear the word risk, name 5 things that are associated with it that you can think of. And then write, risk, and then lines down to the 5. And then for each of the 5 terms that you've come up with, each of the 5 things, come up with 5 more things that are associated with that particular word that you put. So you'll end up with risk up here, and then 5 words, and then for each of the 5 words you'll have 5 more, so you'll have 25 words, plus the 5 here is 30. Okay, each person does this, 1,205 people, and it's done with Dutch people, German people, and English people. And it's equal representation of men and women and different age ranges. And then they used an algorithm to generate a semantic network of risk from the 36,100 associations. And they had these 5 different categories that they picked based on these categories popped out of the data. So in the threat cluster, for example, danger, accident, loss. This was the component most prominently associated with risk, the threat. Okay, so 88%. Closely followed by fortune category, so profit, game, adventure, for example. So up until now, most studies have focused on the negative components of risk. They've ignored the fact that it can also have positive associations. Okay, so then they map both individual and group-specific differences in risk, differences between men and women, difference between ages. Okay, and there are differences. A higher proportion of older people than younger people, and a higher proportion of women than men. They associated risk most closely with threat and less with fortune. Okay, so as you get older and older, I guess you feel vulnerable. You recognize that you don't live forever, and you're more intolerant of, when you think of risk, you're thinking of more of safety things. If you're younger and you're thinking of risk, you're thinking of, taking risks to get ahead. You're associating more with fortune. So, they also ask the question, do people from different language regions think about risk in a similar way? So they had a German survey group, and then a Dutch one, and an English one. There's some small differences, but overall, there were universal correlations in risk representation that transcended the language boundary. So in other words, the study found that, it wasn't so much a language-dependent thing. We're all humans, and we think in similar ways, independent of which language we do it in. So this study sort of laid a new foundation for examining the question of how people think about risk, could play an important role in helping to provide a better understanding of how different social groups interpret risk, enabling risk communication strategies to be improved to combat social polarization. Anything reducing polarization in our society would be a good thing. Polarization is dividing us in all different aspects of things that we do in society. So before I look at the actual paper, this is the news report on it. I'm just going to look at some words just to make sure we're all clear. So semantic is basically, that refers to the meaning in language or logic. Okay, so semantic, we see a sentence or in whatever language, it has some sort of meaning. We derive some meaning from it, and that's the semantics. And you can contrast semantics to lexical or lexicons. So lexical is relating to the words or vocabulary of a language, or the nature of a lexicon or a dictionary. So the difference is, so lexical is the language, the words used. Semantics is really the meaning behind the words used. So if you look at the difference, lexical versus semantic, look at this definition here. A lexical field is a structure formed by lexemes, while a semantic field is the underlying meaning. So semantics is the underlying meaning, and the lexical or lexicon is the words, lexemes, the words, the grouping of words which give the meaning. Okay, so they're quite different. Semantics is the conceptual knowledge of word meanings independent of word forms. The lexicon is the structure of familiar words. It's sort of the memory store of learned spellings, if you like, your internal dictionary. The word, you see a word, you got the meaning. You see another word, you got the meaning. But when the words are all put together, there's a much deeper meaning or understanding of what's being said, and that's the semantics. Corpora is another term that you'll see. That's sort of like the dictionary. It's a large and structured set of texts or words. Okay, that's all it means. And a cosine similarity is, they talk about, it's how basically, if you've got a line B, the projection of A on B is A cos theta. Okay, so basically it's a projection. So if you have a word here, risk, and a word danger, and think of them as vectors, in pointing, like if the arrows are closer together, if the angle's small, the words are much more similar in meaning. So in other words, two words that are synonyms, meaning the exact same thing, theta would be 0, and they mean the same thing. That's how this is discussed, cosine similarity. Okay, so those are, and then there's a database called the smallworldofwords.org. They have databases on the words and languages. SWOW, SWO. Okay, this is what a lot of people that study languages and stuff rely on big databases like that that are downloadable. Okay, so here's the paper in Science Advances. It's a social science study. So what are the defining features of lay people's semantic representation of risk? Okay, so they map the semantics of risk based on word associations to provide insight into both universal and individual differences in the representations of risk. So the mini snowball word association paradigm was used. I explained what that is. And then they used network and sentiment analysis, whatever that is, to characterize the semantics of risk. Okay, so they find that there's universal properties. There's also individual and group differences across ages, differences between sexes and things. But there's certain things that are that come out. So older respondents and female respondents, they show more negative connotations, and they mention more often certain types of activities relative to younger adults and males, respectively. So risk means different things to different individuals, and it changes depending on a person's age. So here we go. So the intro, basically, societies require individuals to navigate an increasing number of social and technological risks. But how do individuals think about risk? Different disciplines have provided several conceptions that are not fully compatible. This may contribute to conceptual and empirical confusion regarding the construct in the cognitive and behavioral sciences. Some people just think of risk as being a statistical concept, a variance, but that's more of a probability thing. That's one component of it. There's also subjective character, and there's psychological dimensions. Okay, so risk means different things to different people depending on our goals and life experiences. So they're trying to understand the psychology of risk. So lots of work's been done in the past, and I'm not going to talk about that. One of the things you can do is you do text mining from places like Wikipedia to find out, what words and how often the frequency that they occur. If you're talking about a technology, the different things, everything that's written about the technology, you can analyze in terms of the words and the language used to see what people's sort of ideas of risk are. But here they did a different thing. They used they call it a mini snowball word association method. So let's look at the diagrams here. So, you can compare, just text-based words. You can look for example, danger, likelihood, peril, risky, averse, threat. You can look for these type of words in, when you're talking about how they're relating to a specific thing, or you can, go more to association-based things. But here we go. Let's look at this. So this is a construction of the semantic network of risk, the meaning behind the words when we're talking about risk. So if you hear the word risk, what are 5 words that you think of associated with risk, for each individual? And then if you pick, say, danger here, right? Then what are 5 words that come from danger? And if you think of lucky or unlucky, what are 5 words that come from that, and so on. Okay, and then this data is all analyzed for all the people that respond in the study. Okay, and based on the analysis, they got these 5 different components, or if you like, which were the 5 most important words of each component. So they ranked them in the entire network of data, and we'll just have a look at this. So this is an interesting plot here. So basically, there's all of these mappings between the words, and the colors here are associated with these 5 levels back up here. Where is it? It's actually over in the paper here. So you've got the, yeah, so these 5 different categories, those colors are aligned, those colors appear here. So you've got the different, and then the different words that are prominent. Okay, so it's divided into, you've got threat, dare, avoidance, unknown. Big section here. You've got the decision, ponder, assessment, take a chance, consideration here. And these are more the financial money ones, bet, win, rewarding, stake. These are more, the green one, I have to go back again. Fortune is the green one. And let's go back here. And then the yellow one is activities. So, it could be skydiving, parachuting, driving fast, motorcycles, smoking, taking a risk. People know they're taking a risk. Okay, so risky and dangerous things there. So you can map them out, and look for try to analyze them for clusters and things. You can separate them by ages, by gender, etc. So here's that image that was in the previous, in sort of the summary of it with all of the different categories. And this comes out of the data and, the different words within each category. And then they tried to, and go further and compare different age groups and see. So what they did find, they found that across the languages, there's a lot of commonality. Apart from some cultural things, they found that, how things changed as a function of age. Okay, how they changed across a person's lifespan. For example, many words more frequently retrieved by older adults centered around mobility, road traffic, driving and holiday, or health, disease, health, and operation. So, that's not surprisingly. People think a lot more of their health as they get older. Many words more frequently retrieved by younger age groups center on entertainment, game, fun, adventure, thrills, and skydiving, financial prospects, stock exchange, money, shares, and insurance. The most frequent associates of risks, such as danger, fear, accident, and loss, show very small age effects. Okay, so they don't change too much with age. It reinforces the observation of conceptual stability across age, but there is a slight increase of concern of these things with age. And there's also gender differences between them as well. So they followed this, this is the different age groups. This, for example, is the threat. So the general trend is slightly increasing. Fortune, as you get older, you worry less about being rich and having great fortune, according to this. Activity, right? So you can have a look at it. You can see the differences among the age groups, linear effective age here. Okay, so linear effective age, so this is when you're young, I believe, and this is as you're aging. So the different things take different locations depending on age. And the this is female minus male. So this stuff here is considered mostly by females: pregnancy, curiosity, joy, travel, terror, no risk, no fun. And males, politics, work, war here. So that's why we have all these wars. Men are in charge. Okay, there's more data and stuff, but I'll go to the conclusions here. So this paper basically, if you're interested, this is open source, I believe. You can just Google on the titles and have a look for yourself. But so this paper looked at the semantic representation of risk and potential individual and age and gender differences in the representation of this concept using a novel mini snowball word association task. The task asked participants to generate words associated with the concept of risk and words associated with the initial risk associates, and then did network and sentiment analysis to identify a general network of risk associates, then made use of this network to characterize individual differences across age and gender. Okay, so basically they got 5 distinct components, which they labeled as threat, fortune, activity, investment, and analysis. The threat component emerged as the most prominent in people's semantic network. Okay, so people are most concerned about threats and safety. The other components accounted for more than half of people's associations with risk, even when only considering first responses. The fortune component seems to represent positive associations with risk, echoing recent calls for the need to understand positive aspects associated with risk and risk-taking, and the close relationship between risk and reward. Okay, so, and these sort of things change with age and so on. So, you know, people are very concerned with safety and risk. So why is our understanding, why is our action on climate change so pathetic as a society? And I think, you know, the misinformation from the fossil fuel company has really clouded the whole issue. It's politicized the whole issue, and you know, we're not stepping up to the plate to respond to it. So, you know, we're committing suicide as a society, basically. Okay, so there's some more information on the statistics and so on, but you know, you basically get the idea. So anyway, I thought, you know, any paper I come across that, you know, tries to delve into risk, however it does it, you know, many of these studies are social science studies looking at, you know, how people think of risk, you know, in their language, in surveys, etc. You know, I delve into it in general to try to figure out, you know, how we can overcome this lethargy in our response to climate change, which is, because it's beyond my, you know, it's hard for me to fathom that we're still in this state. You know, we can't just do something to address the climate issue, because we're fighting the power structures of society to keep things going the same way they are. So anyway, I've learned some things from this paper, and I hope I've managed to convey some of the things that are in the paper to you, and hopefully, you know, some people are interested enough that they, you know, delve into this a bit deeper. So thanks again for listening, and I'll chat again soon. So bye for now.